Though Nigeria's debts to gross domestic products (GDP) ratio is still within the approved limit of 55% set by the World Bank and 70% by ECOWAS, our rising debt profile is becoming unhealthy to our economy. The Director General of the Debt Management Office (DMO), Patience Oniha, said the country's total public debt stock increased to 39.56 trillion naira in 2021 from 32.92 trillion naira in 2020 due to new borrowings by the federal and states. This is taking huge toll on the economy as Nigeria spent 2.93 trillion naira on debt servicing payments in 2021. Jide, whatever we are making now, no matter how we profit earnings and everything, what we use in debt servicing is so ridiculous that I don't have to be an economics to know that, look, this is not sustainable.
No, that's the first signal. That's the first signal that you get that, look, this is simply not adding up. If you are committing up to 90% of your earnings to debt servicing,
90% of your earnings,
chances are that it will grow. And when it grows and you are now committing 100% of what you earn, and when I'm talking about what we earn, I'm talking about the revenue generating agencies, what they bring to the table. The NNPC,
customs,
the MASA, customs, all of them, what they bring to the table. More than 90% of them, of what they bring, we use to service debt. Nobody needs to tell you that this thing is becoming, it's no longer funny. And it's not just the state, the federal government, states too. Taking bonds here and there, taking loans. There are some governors who can't live at it, ask themselves, like, look, to make money, shouldn't I look inwards? What should I do? They would rather go and take a loan. By taking that loan, you are simply passing the burden to oncoming generations. They don't want to face serious financial crisis. They want to solve such problems by simply borrowing. There are some states that need to look at even their overheads. Why are we paying this much by way of salaries to civil servants? Can we look within? Are we carrying dead wood that we need to just get off our wage bill? States need to look at that. Bola Tinubu once did that in Lagos. There are many people, both in the federal and state services, that do not deserve to continue to keep their jobs. As I've said before,
use government patronage.
Nobody will run a private company the way we are running Nigeria. We seem to think that, look, because Nigeria belongs to everyone, that we should just run the country the way we like. And why can't we tell ourselves that borrowing to pay salaries? I know some governors have borrowed money to pay salary, either from within our country, because this debt stock that we are talking about, they are both domestic and foreign. Some are taking loans from banks, Nigerian banks, to pay salaries. And we've had even the finance minister say that they are taking money from CBN to pay salary. I was shocked the day I heard. I didn't know that it was happening. Which will take us back to what Obaseki said. Because you can call it ways and means, you can call it whatever you like. It still does not bode well if you are taking money from CBN for the purpose of paying salaries. You have to look at that problem in the face. If you need to get some of these workers off the wage bill, you need to do that. Otherwise, you are postponing the evil day. Time will come when you won't be able to continue.
It was never like this.
Yes.
Well, I thought the increase of crude oil in the international markets that will add to our own foreign reserve and things will, things will be better.
It doesn't really,
now it's doing over. We're doing over $100 per
it doesn't really
per
work
barrel.
that way. It doesn't really work.
It's even more difficult.
No, it doesn't really work that way because there are different things tied to crude, no matter the price of that crude. The production, the one is the allocation from OPEC. There's an allocation as a member of OPEC that you cannot go beyond. That's one.
We can't even meet our
That's what I'm saying.
We can't meet our
That's the means of production. Because of different factors, a lot of times we don't even meet our allocation. Different types of time. So let me say that it's not bad to borrow money. You understand? It depends on what you are using the borrowed money for. The richest man in Africa is Alhaji Aliko Dangote. He relies a lot on loans. He cannot build the biggest facility. He cannot build the biggest refinery in one of the biggest in the world without facility. Yes, one of the biggest in the world without facility. So borrowing money is not the problem. It is what we use the borrow funds for. If we use borrow funds for infrastructure, it is good because one, it will stimulate the economy and then it will have a lot of knock-on effect on the economy. The problem we have is that we spend a lot of this borrowed money on recurrent expeditions and frivolities. It's just like an individual. If you borrow money from the bank and you use it to marry second wife, you use it to buy a new car, you use it to buy a Rolex watch.
That cannot generate
That's what I'm saying. That's what I tell you, that you are going to visit, you are going to get to AMCON one day. It's a straightforward thing. That's the problem with Nigeria. We are borrowing so much that we are spending the money on a lot of frivolities that ultimately we are going to run into a problem.
All right, please. Even my own idea is we can't, even for infrastructure, we can't keep borrowing money. In other countries, they are adopting the PPP approach.
Yeah.
And at some point, they can even transfer ownership to you.
Why don't we do
this?
Partnership?
Why don't we do that PPP a lot more? Instead of simply going to borrow. Because
we're doing that too.
No, we need to do it a lot more.
We need to do it a lot more.
The problem with that is that you need to get people willing to want to invest in your country.
If we are honest,
if we
are honest, and they know that we honor our obligations.
Yes,
nobody.
You honor your obligations all the time.
People will come on their own to say they want.
Yes, of course they will. The problem is that the government is not sincere enough to meet some obligations. You understand?
Okay.
So
Angola just built a new refinery through PPP. What's wrong with us?
Joining us via Zoom for more insights on this rising debt issue is the CEO of Carry Asset Management Company, Johnson Chukwu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon. Let me start by congratulating your program, Journalist Hangout, for the award you won as the best program of the year. And for you, Babatunde, for your award at the Journalist of the Year. Congratulations to both the program and to you as an individual.
Thank you.
We are grateful.
Thank you. Now, what we are looking at now is that a situation that we will not even enjoy the how are we going to call it, like fruit of our labor. That anytime we are making interest, we are going to use that interest income to service debts. Over 90% of our income to service debt. How healthy is this situation?
Of course, I've heard a conversation that has been going on in the studio, and clearly we are all in agreement that it's not healthy for any agency, anybody, be it a government, be it a private sector company, be it a family, a household, to spend 90% of your revenue on debt service. It then means you are not investing in growth. You are going to be retarding, because if you are spending 90% of your revenue on debt service, paying interest, what of when the principal is due? You see the 10% that is left that you use to pay the principal, because somehow, if it's debt, it has a maturity date. There will become a day of reckoning where you have to pay that debt, to pay back the principal. Where will you get the money to pay back the principal? But beyond that, there are some basic expenditures that the government must incur. Expenditure relates to running costs of the government, which you guys have touched on, building infrastructure. Running costs of the government will include, apart from the overhead, you have to maintain certain structures, the armed forces, the police, the judiciary. These are basic social supporting infrastructure without which a country cannot operate or exist effectively. They're what they call, you say that is the state has failed, a failed state. If you can't maintain an effective policing system, you can't maintain effective judiciary, you can't maintain effective military, then your country will be a failed state. These are what are among the things you need basic money to pay for. So if you spend 90% already on paying interest, where will you get the money to pay for these basic necessities? We have now mentioned the issue of education, healthcare, and then before you move to infrastructure, transport infrastructure, power infrastructure. I hear people complain about power supply. So these are symptomatic of a situation where the government does not have any money to do basic infrastructure because we are spending 90% on debt service. And this, unless that is reversed, this will worsen because government ability to meet some of these basic needs is now lacking, and we are seeing gaps. And we are wondering why is government not be able to do its play its role as a government? It's because the monies that should have been used to do those things are now used to pay debt.
And the debts are largely denominated in foreign currency, which makes things worse for us.
Well, we have 40 billion in foreign currency, about 60 billion in local currency. About $38 billion dollars is what we have as total foreign currency debt. About $15 billion converted to dollar is in local currency component of the debt. The foreign currency is about 15 trillion naira, while the balance is local currency debt. So in effect, you have total foreign currency debt that's slightly above your current foreign reserve. Of course, we know you are not supposed to pay them off immediately. Some of them are concessionary loans, but they are debt. Many of them have interest on it, or all of them have interest on it. Some are very low interest rate. Yeah. But the core of the problem is that your foreign exchange is also declining. You have touched on the issue of crude production, which is now challenged. One, you have the OPEC quota. Now we're not even producing up to our OPEC quota. So, and then you have situations where even the production is taking place is part of the production sharing contract, which are produced in deep offshore, for which Nigeria gets minimal return. So in effect, the government ability to earn foreign exchange is now constrained, which may in due course in future, not immediate, in future make it difficult to pay interest on those foreign currency. We just borrowed last week about 1.25 billion naira from the international bond market that we borrowed at about 8.375%. So in effect, by the time you start counting for next year, your foreign currency debt would have increased at the minimum as at today has increased by $1.25 billion. And you still get counted. The Minister of Finance said they are going to tap the Eurobond market to fund petroleum subsidy. And that's another consumption you can't touch. You can't really see it. At the end of the year, you won't see where this money went into, because it has gone into consumption. It flows down the drain. So by the time you increase your foreign currency debt to fund subsidy, you further balloon your interest payment without any commensurate investment in fiscal infrastructure. So you are not increasing the capacity of the economy to produce goods and services, well as you have increased the burden you have imposed on the economy. And if this burden keeps increasing, you're going to get a point where it becomes difficult to honor these obligations.
Let's look at the issue of domestic debt, which seems to be going up. But there are a lot of states now that have resorted to borrowing, and they are not even economically viable to be able to pay back those debts.
Well, if you recall, in 2015, when the current President Muhammadu Buhari became president, he granted some form of forbearance to state government that were leveraged, that had borrowed in excess. And unfortunately, there were no limitations imposed on those states. So what happened was they had those loans transferred to the bonds were issued, federal government bonds were issued, and then they are now owing the federal government. And they were granted years, concessionary periods to pay back those loans. So what they did, immediately the loan left their books or their balance sheet, they now have the breathing space to go and borrow more. The key thing is that for every loan for forbearance or concession, there must be a restrictive covenant that make it difficult for the person to go back into borrowing. It's like what former Governor PPP will always say, that you have a drunkard, you go and pay his bills in the bar, and then he just goes back and start drinking again. So you must make sure that if you have to pay those bills for him, that you limit him or restrict him from going back to the bar to panda binge. And that's what was missing when that good intended policy of the government was implemented. And so you realize that even those states that had no strong balance sheet or capacity to borrow went back borrowing. But once you make it difficult for states that borrow and are unable to pay to borrow more, they will be forced to become innovative. Either they stop borrowing or they structure their balance sheet and expenditure so that they reduce their expenditure. Or in the alternative, one of the things I advocated is that where a state serially fails to meet its obligation, the state should be allowed to merge with a contiguous state that is economically viable, so that you have, at the end of the day, you have strong federating units instead of what we have here, where the federating units are fractionalized entities created for the purpose of receiving federation allocation from the center. But the federation allocation had dried up, so we need to look at the structure we have and ask ourselves, is it still optimal?
Mr. Johnson Chukwu, now the way out, the final solution, what should this government put in place to make sure that we can at least considerably reduce our debt burden?
Well, the first thing you do is do away with expenses that are not necessary, that are not absolutely necessary for the government to incur. There are expenditures today that the government is incurring that are not absolutely necessary. So if we eliminate them, that will reduce the weight that the government is bearing, the need for the government to spend money. So that's the first thing. Then you look at the apparatus of government, the bureaucracy. There was a time when former head of service administration, Mr. Stephen Olasanya, came up with a document, a recommendation on rationalizing the administrations and departments of the federal government. That has not been implemented. They may be need to implement. I've also heard you guys make reference to something of that nature where we need to reduce the government overhead. Then the third factor is that we need to, the government needs to pull back from some of the assets it's investing in, which I'm also happy you guys mentioned. The issue of building infrastructure from budget allocation. Government does not have the resources to continue to build infrastructure from budget allocation. So we must consider seriously the issue of public-private partnership that would allow private sector to build this infrastructure and maybe build, operate, and transfer. After some time, after they recover their money, they can transfer to the government, the ownership to the government. And then the government also needs to expand its revenues. One of the most assured way to expand your revenue is to expand the economy, create appropriate policy that allow private sector investors to invest in critical sectors of the economy, not just infrastructure, in productive activities, industries, businesses. And if they do that, those companies will make money, pay salaries and wages to employees, who will in turn pay taxes. And the government and the companies also at the corporate level will also pay corporate taxes to the government. So that way the government is able to grow its revenue. But that is only possible if the economy is expanding. Because if you want to insist on extracting more value from existing taxpayers, you're going to tax them to death. So the government should focus on what are those policies we need to put in place to ensure that the economy begins to grow and grow at a faster rate. So jobs are created, productive activities are taking place, and those companies earn enough revenue and profit to pay taxes to the government.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, for your intervention. Johnson Chukwu is the CEO of Carry Asset Management Company. Thank you for your contribution on Journalist Hangouts on Sunday.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have to just manage this economy better than, we're doing right now.
I'm happy that he also alluded to the fact that we can't continue to borrow money for infrastructure. We can't continue to depend on budgetary allocation to fix infrastructure. We need to do it the way it's been done in other countries. If an African country can build a refinery from the scratch through PPP, what stops us from doing it? When people trust us, they will do it. They will come here, agree to do business with us, and in the end, they will transfer to us. But we are not, we want to award contracts all the time, want to award contracts. And
even we have individuals that can finance these projects within the country.
In fact, there are some projects that you cannot, given the fact that even the budget is shrinking, you will not find that money. Look at Lagos-Ibadan Expressway,
Then how many years we have to grapple with this?
Abuja-Kano Expressway, and this second Niger Bridge. We have had to go and take money from Abacha loot, you know, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund. We have had to take money from there because that the Abuja-Kano Expressway alone is 700 billion. Wow. How much is allocated to Ministry of Works in our budget every year? This completely strips what is allocated to Fashola for works. So we can't continue along this path. If there's big infrastructure, for example, get the PPP, look for the PPP model. At the end of the day, you don't need to spend your resources. You can then free such resources for education and other areas of the economy that need it.
You know why there is problem in that field? There's problem because of corruption within the system. It's not as if those who run our economy don't know these things. They know. For example, we have 4 refineries. If you remember, during the time of Obasanjo, before Obasanjo, the refinery in Port Harcourt was concession to Dangote and Otedola, and it was reversed. From that time till now, that refinery has not worked. They've spent so much billions doing turnaround maintenance there
that we don't see.
The staff
there are people that still collect salaries. So it is the corruption. They know that government has no business doing business. You understand? It is very difficult for government agency to be efficient when it comes to business because of corruption, bottlenecks, bureaucracy, all kinds of problems. Yeah, so it is always better to allow businessmen whose business is to do business to do these things. And I agree with the private-public partnership. It works. It can work. But nobody wants to bring his money. It's not charity. It must know that you must be able to live to the agreement
we always cancel the deal.
Yes, because another government will come and we just unilaterally change. I did that
of MOVAT in the aviation sector. That was what we did now. We brought equipment, brought everything. Then we came, we said, Mavis, we said no more. So who will come and do business with you?